right, everybody, welcome in to your favorite Load the Box show, I guess. I don't know. I'm assuming if you're a Vikings fan, you like this one more than the Browns guys. I'm your host, Jordan Hawthorne. I can't find Chris's polo because I'm still not wearing it, so I went with the Klein salsa this week because he's my favorite NFL player of all time. I think I already said it. I'm your host, Jordan Hawthorne, joined, as always, by the marvelous, the wonderful, the exquisite Jack H. Day. Jack, a win is a win. I don't think I feel as bad about this one as I did in Carolina. There's still some things to fix. Blah, blah, blah. We'll talk about the game more in depth because it's the bye week. There's no opponent this upcoming week, so we got some other things to talk about. How's your week been, man? How have you been?
Yeah, it's been an exhausting week so far. I've been busy with work, but like you said, I think going into the Monday after the Detroit game, it was like one of those things where it was a win, but I don't think the majority of Vikings fans felt good about that one. I still think, like you said, there's plenty of areas that this team needs to fix. There's the special teams was absolutely atrocious in Carolina. Like that's something that since we positively talked about them early on in the year, which we've since committed to never do again, they have been, I mean, Greg Joseph hit the field goal against Detroit, but other than that, I mean, the special teams is rapidly declining, and that was frustrating. The defense was very, very good until it wasn't, with like 5 minutes left in the game, so that was kind of frustrating. It's just things that are very, very typical, and we'll probably get to this a little bit later in the show, but it's typical where this team just can't close games. Obviously, the offense comes down. Kirk Cousins led what was his second game-winning drive, probably should have been his fourth game-winning drive for all the Kirk Cousins haters out there, but he's playing his best football in the biggest moments this year. And granted, I know it's the two wins have now been against Detroit and a banged up Carolina team, but Carolina's defense is very good in terms of EPA. I believe Arizona is right up there too. And Kirk Cousins has absolutely shredded both of those defenses. So Kirk Cousins is playing phenomenal football right now. It's entertaining to see him find KJ Osborne. KJ Osborne has been one of those receivers that has just come up with clutch catch after clutch catch in some of the biggest moments as well. Finally finds a clutch catch in the end zone and does the replica of the Minneapolis Miracle with tossing the helmet, which was cool. But like you said, a win's a win. It wasn't necessarily the prettiest win, but overall the Vikings did what they needed to do and got to 3-3 going into the bye week.
Yeah, it's funny how far we've fallen. Where the Minneapolis Miracle was, it sent us to an NFC Championship game. It was this big moment. Playoff win against a rival Saints team. Diggs throws the helmet, and now we're throwing helmets for games to get us back to 500 before the bye. How the mighty have fallen, some might say. I don't know. I've seen a lot of pretty pessimistic Vikings fans talking about how this game feels similar to Detroit, and to me it just doesn't. The Detroit game, Detroit's obviously not a very good team. I saw a lot of people high on Detroit this week against Cincinnati, this past week, against Cincinnati, and Cincinnati just dog walked them. So I don't know how good Detroit is, but it's a division rival. They're obviously going to elevate to play against us. It's just kind of what it is. But I think, and this is something I've been talking with a couple of my buddies that are Bengals fans, I think it's important to see your team win games like that. And the Vikings now have 2 wins this season. Well, it went late. The game maybe shouldn't have been as close as it was. Maybe if you keep the foot on the gas a little bit, you can just extend the lead to 3 or 4 possessions and just end up blowing a team out. But to win a game where you kind of have to grit your teeth, and your quarterback has to grab the head coach by the scruff of his shirt and get him hyped up after a field goal. I don't know. I'm starting to come around a little bit on the close games, but I do think it's funny, and I have to share this. Going before overtime, whenever Greg Joseph lined up to kick the game-winning field goal that he of course missed, I told my dad, I was like, "Does it always have to come down to a kick? Oh, does it always have to be this way?" And he said, "Jordan, I've been a Vikings fan since 1960 something, and it always does. It's always been this way. It's never been, the Vikings won by 50 points this week. It's always been, and here comes the Vikings kicker with a chance to send us off and get us back to 500 or go to the Super Bowl or what have you." So such is life for a Vikings fan. But I think a big thing, and I want to go back to that Arizona game quickly. Not a lot of sacks against two pretty good pass rushes. Chandler Jones was playing. He was healthy. There was no issues with him against the Vikings, and they kind of schemed him out of the game. I think they gave up one sack in that game to J.J. Watt, I believe. Or maybe it was Chandler Jones. I think it was only one sack against Arizona, though. And then this week it finally happened. It's Darrisaw season, you know. Everybody get excited. Yay, we'll start in the rookie tackle, and he looked pretty good going up against a Carolina defense that's pretty solid in its own right. So that's my biggest takeaway, if you will, is just, hey, Christian Darrisaw looked good in his true debut. They actually pulled the trigger and said, well, we're sending him out there. All the snaps on offense, he's going to be the guy. And he looked pretty good. He set some edges in the run game. He kept Cousins clean. Cousins didn't get sacked at all in that game. If he did, I think he did once, but there was a penalty, like a defensive holding or something, so it didn't really count. And yeah, Darrisaw's my big takeaway this week. I mean, I don't know what else you can say other than I don't know, man. Maybe I've been wrong. Maybe it is doable to have a really good offensive line and let Cousins sling the ball. I've said for years it's not doable, but I don't know. My hopes are high this week, and it's because there's no way we can lose this week. So, Jack, what was your biggest takeaway from this game? And also, Tom Day says kicking is for Sacco. Get rid of it. I think we just need to send a package, like a Deshaun Watson type package for Justin Tucker, and have him come in and he'll just fix it, and then hopefully we can just go from there. But biggest takeaway for you this week, Jack?
Yeah, I like the Darrisaw take. I mean, 52 pass blocking snaps, 0 sacks allowed. I think there was a couple times where like Burns got around him and he kind of got away with just chipping him and threw him behind Kirk Cousins. And if Kirk Cousins did a fantastic job at getting the ball out of his hands as well in this one. There are some times where I think Burns would have gotten to Kirk Cousins if it wasn't boom, 1-2 throw right away. And he was doing a fantastic job with that. I think another huge takeaway, which I mentioned when I was talking previously, is the Vikings have a very, very legitimate wide receiver 3 on this roster now. KJ Osborne, and it shows the trust that Kirk Cousins has in KJ Osborne. It shows on film. You go back and watch that Cardinals game. KJ Osborne had that big catch to get the Vikings lined up for what should have been a game-winning field goal. Kirk Cousins is going to wide receiver 3 KJ Osborne in do-or-die situations. We saw it in Carolina as well, the game-winning touchdown. I think he had another big catch to set up what should have been another Greg Joseph game-winning field goal. But this is a team where they have arguably the top duo in the NFL, and Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. We learned against Carolina that, yes, Adam Thielen is on the opposite side of 30, and that's not necessarily always a good thing for wide receivers, but he's showing no signs of slowing down right now. You have Justin Jefferson, who's still emerging and is, in my opinion, a top 5 wide receiver already. And now you have KJ Osborne, who's showing he's a sure-handed guy. I don't know if he's necessarily the fastest guy out there, but someone tweeted at me when I tweeted something out during the game, and it was almost, he does remind me a little bit of a Jarius Wright. Like, if you need a completion on third down, it always seemed like old reliable Jarius Wright. He wasn't going to put up huge numbers on the stat sheet, but he came up in clutch situations when you needed him. KJ Osborne is doing that. And I've been talking about KJ Osborne, these wide receivers, Kirk Cousins playing a phenomenal game, and Delvin Cook still had like 140 yards and a rushing touchdown on the day. This offense, at times, it looked like it had slowed down, but I think I saw a stat. This was like the 3rd most amount of yards that a Vikings offense has put up in franchise history. Not in the last 10 years or 15 years. Since 1961, since this team started its franchise, I think it was like 573 total yards or something along those lines. Like, they had a monster day, and Carolina's defense has been pretty solid up to this point. Switching over to the other side of the ball, I don't think there was a lot for me to take away from the defense. I think my game ball pick, I picked Harrison Smith. He didn't have anything fancy. It was cool. The first play of the game, from scrimmage, I should say, was, and this is where you can insert your joke that we're going to have to talk about the rest of the year. But Bashaud Breeland had a very nice break on the ball. and intercepted it with his Johnson in hand. And
Could you
it was
imagine if
good.
he did that in Minnesota? Could you imagine first play? I wish this game was in Minnesota so bad because I guarantee he would have done the Marshawn Lynch, like he would have grabbed his jock strap and he would have been all over it, man. It's it's elite. It's the best storyline in the NFL right now. And I think my camera's frozen. So can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
All right, give me 1 second. Let me switch my video. Production issues are always fun. I'm about to have a really bad video quality, so please forgive me because I'm using this little shoddy video cam that I used forever before getting a better camera that is giving me some issues. But anyway, please continue.
Yeah, it's been nice kind of seeing Bashaud Breeland after all the criticism. Just he's turned it around. And granted, I think this Vikings defense was helped frequently by Robbie Anderson and wearing oven mitts throughout the game because he could not catch a cold in that game. And it was, I don't know, Robbie Anderson, that was weird to me because I feel like he was one of those guys going into the season. He seemed like he was a shoo-in for fantasy football, like a depth target that you could have. And I've looked at some of the stat sheets and I was talking to a buddy about this. Like, why is Robbie Anderson getting targeted 11 times and only having 2 catches? I just found out on Sunday why that's happening because he cannot catch a football to save his life. So that benefit, and it wasn't just him. The Carolina Panthers were having drops after drops after drops. So I think that just about wraps up the majority of my thoughts. The one thing, this defense had played so well throughout the first 55 minutes of this game. And then you give up, and granted, this is after Patrick Peterson went down, who the team account tweeted out that he got carted off with cramps. He was questionable to return. Comes out this week, it's a hamstring injury, and he was placed on IR. So that's another weird. It's just a typical Minnesota Vikings fashioned injury where it's like, hey, maybe this isn't so bad. And it's like slap in the face. It is that bad. Maybe it's not the worst thing. It sounds like Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer, they did press conferences, their bye-week press conferences this week. Sounds like they're expecting to have him back on the day he can return, the game he can return, which is the Green Bay Packers game. But you can't let a team go 98 yards with under 2 minutes. It's a 2-minute warning, 98 yards. Cameron Dantzler got burnt by DJ Moore. That was just frustrating. And I think that's something that we can kind of use to transition eventually into the show where, or towards the back half of the show, what you want to talk about is these are the moments where Mike Zimmer hasn't been good. When the spotlight's on Mike Zimmer, he has struggled. And you know what I've seen in 2021, which is a narrative that's been pushed against Kirk Cousins throughout his career? It's the opposite for Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is playing his best football right now when the spotlight is on him and he needs to drive down the field and put his team in a winning situation. Mike Zimmer wants his defense out there. That's how he's operated this team. We've seen the stats already. He has a elite team in terms of third down percentage. Why in the heck can you not stop a 98-yard drive when the team has 2 minutes left in the game, when it's Sam Darnold operating at quarterback, a quarterback who Mike Zimmer has had success against in the past? Granted, that was with the New York Jets, but that was the most frustrating takeaway for me when this offense is playing the way that it has been, the defense, and it goes back to something I've said over and over and over again. This team, it just lacks playing complementary football. It can't do it, and I have no faith that they're going to be able to do it. The next stretch of 4 games that they have is brutal, and if they can't figure out a way to do that, this is going to be a long, long season.
Yeah, this season could quickly go from 3-3. Technically, if the playoffs started right now, the Vikings are a wild card team. Just fun fact. So, we go from that to, oh, holy crap, we're 3-7, and we're probably going to be talking about quarterbacks. We're probably going to be talking about even more head coaches. A lot of things are going to be talked about. But it comes down to, and obviously the point about never really, it feels like the Vikings, since Cousins has started playing in Minnesota, not blaming Cousins, that's just the timetable since, after the 2017 season, I can't think of too many games where we've really just had 60 minutes of good offense and good defense. I'm not even talking about neither Jack or myself are asking for 42-3 blowouts where each side of the ball plays like the best side of the week. If you each just play like the top 10 units, that on paper you should be the Vikings should win a lot of games, and that's why we're talking about head coaches later on in the show tonight, and that's why I think a lot of people are calling for head coaches. It comes down to me to, would you rather have a defense that through 55 minutes is one of the best in the league, but then when it really counts, the play calling starts playing prevent defense, which Tom Day is in the chat saying, we can't play this prevent defense, which I agree with you. We're doing something that's worked all day, and then we're switching to a more prevent style because I don't know if it's Mike Zimmer's a bend but don't break kind of guy, kind of a, look, they can get in the field goal range all they want, keep the clock ticking. Eventually, we're not going to let them get that 5 or 6 yards that they need to get the touchdown. But teams are doing it to us, and I think that's because I don't know. It comes down to would you rather have 55 minutes of a really elite defense, or would you rather have 5 minutes of a defense that gets you a stop when you need it? Because that's what defense ends up being about in the NFL nowadays, is getting stops when you need them versus who cares about a third down stop in the first quarter whenever the game comes down to you need a third down stop with 2 minutes to go. So it's frustrating. I understand the frustrations that Vikings fans are feeling. I'm also feeling them, but I am feeling positive just because we finally got to see Darisaw out there. We finally got to see, the offense is kind of back. And I think if the offense can get back, I'm putting a little bit of faith in Zimmer that he's going to be able to kind of do things. Also, I hate coming on here and saying things that my dad said to me because it just turns into the Jeff Hawthorne show instead of, Jordan and Jack. But us having a bad kicker is a good thing. It means we're not going to try 50 yarders late in games. We're going to either go for it in fourth and short situations, or we're gonna punt and pin them deep versus giving them the ball at midfield. I think it's just going to lead to more aggressive play calling. I mean, look at what they did in overtime. They could have easily done what they did against Cincinnati and tried to run the ball, set up for a field goal, kick it, and win. But they didn't. They decided, kick it and have a chance to win. But they didn't. They decided, look, let's go for their throats. Let's throw this, out to KJ Osborne and win the game. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Bashad Breeland's pick was good. I'm trying to think through the things in my head that I liked about this game. And
yeah, I don't think it'll jump out necessarily on the stat sheet, but I've been seeing a lot of PFF rankings, and it's Armon Watts has been spectacular, and Dalvin Tomlinson had a solid game. Xavier Woods has been a pleasant surprise. I think I liked it a lot when they made the signing. And I don't necessarily know if it showed through the first couple weeks, but as of late, Xavier Woods has been playing good football. Mackenzie Alexander's been playing good football as well. And you have a much, much improved pass rush from a year ago. So it's been entertaining. This defense has pieces in play. They still just don't seem like they're fully gelled together. And like I said, the complementary stuff where you can't put your best game out there on defense and then Gary Kubiak, it's like when you put a good defensive game plan out there, Clint Kubiak, I don't know where he goes. I don't know if he goes and uses the restroom for 40 minutes of the game and there's an intern calling plays or what it is, but there's times where they're out there, and that's what this team looks like. So it's frustrating. We have to see that. And I want to say something too before we get into the back portion of the show. We were supposed to talk about quarterbacks in college and coaches tonight. And Jordan and I, based off me not being able to watch enough college football this weekend, unfortunately, but I want to phrase it as this and see if you agree with me, because I'm okay with saying it this way. I don't need to talk about quarterbacks for the time being. Nope. There's absolutely no reason Vikings fans need to be talking about that. There's other holes on this team that I think we will obviously get to when we get into draft season. But right now, I think the conversation revolves around whether or not this team should extend Kirk Cousins, honestly. Because
go ahead, finish your thought.
Well, next year, everyone knows the cap hit next year. It's terrifying. And it's not a call out to Kirk Cousins per se, but you look at what Tom Brady does. Tom Brady goes out and he wants to win football games. He takes smaller amounts of money so they can build a spectacular team around him. Kirk Cousins has been paid a lot of money over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years of his career. I'm not the one to say, hey, take less money, because that's not our place to be saying that to the quarterback in the Minnesota Vikings. But if you were willing to do that after he's made all this money, I think from the sounds of things, it sounds like Kirk Cousins is rather smart with his money. So if he has some of that money saved up, does he maybe do that? And they say, hey, you know what? Let's extend you. you just played, and knock on wood, there's a lot of football left to be played, but Kirk Cousins is playing at a very high level right now, and it's been fun to watch. Like, if he has the offensive line in front of him, which I think you and I are both starting to get a little overly excited. We just watched one game of Christian Darrisaw. We're like, we have a left tackle.
He's the best left tackle in NFL history. He makes Joe Thomas look like a high school prospect. Like, he's just elite, Jack. What do you want from me?
But if you can extend Kirk Cousins and get that cap hit down in 2022, because it's a $45 million cap hit, that's huge. Get that down, re-sign some of these one-year deal guys that are playing at a high level, get hopefully a good draft class in, which we don't need to bring up the 2021 draft class. I think we've already done that plenty, and we've Christian Darrisaw is playing now, so there's really no other aspect of that draft where I expected guys to come in and play anyways.
This is just really quick insult, just because I don't know if we will get to this news. Amir Abdullah has been released because Nwangu season is among us, folks. It's happening. Everyone complained no draft picks were playing. He's coming. He's going to atone kicks and punts. I'm telling you, he's going to be good. He's going to be really good.
That's exciting news too, because the Vikings have superstar running back. They have top 10 quarterback. They have an offensive line that's showing signs of improvement. And now they have a trio of wide receivers that are playing at a high level. You throw in like an extremely quick gadget type player into that mix where you can dial up 3, 4, 5 plays a game for him. That could be exciting. It could bring another aspect to this offense that they really haven't had. I know Dalvin Cook, he's very elusive. He's got the speed, but no one on this roster has Keenan Nwangu speed. So that'll be a kind of something worth monitoring throughout the rest of the season. But just let me wrap up on the Kirk Cousins stuff. I think it's fair for us to say that's kind of why we don't feel the need to talk about quarterbacks yet. I will mention Matt Corral. If you haven't watched a Matt Corral Ole Miss game this year, make sure you do so, because he is one of the more electric players in college football, and he's very entertaining to watch. But right now, Kirk Cousins is the quarterback of this team this year, and I think he's the quarterback of this team in 2022. And I think there's a very good possibility, depending on Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman's jobs, that he could be the quarterback for a few years after those years as well. So I think that's something worth monitoring. Kirk Cousins is playing, I said this at the top of the show, he's playing his best football in clutch moments. And that's something that you and I have called for the last 3 years. We're starting to see that. Now we just need to see this team fully play up to their potential around him and see if they can make any sort of playoff run and surprise some people over this devastating stretch of the next 4 games.
Absolutely. And let me try and sell the Cousins extension to the non-Cousins people, because it almost makes sense to me as well. And maybe not even an extension, but let me try and sell, hey, let's not talk about quarterbacks this season, probably. This quarterback class is not very good. There's maybe 2 guys. I know Jack likes a guy. I like a guy, and all honesty, maybe it's because he goes to the University of Cincinnati that I like this guy. But other than that, it's kind of thin. There's no guys that are like, last year it felt like all 5 quarterbacks, maybe not Mac Jones, but 4 of the 5 quarterbacks were clear cut. Like, yeah, they would be the number 1 pick if they were, if they were in different drafts, every one of them would probably be the number 1 pick pretty easily because of their talent and their potential and blah, blah, blah. This year's completely different. It's like, hey, Matt Corral's having a good season. He'll probably go late top 10-ish. Like, I would say somewhere in there. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't even think the draft experts really know at this point. I've seen a mock draft that doesn't have Matt Corral going in the first round.
Right.
Excuse me. And then I've seen mock drafts that have him going top 10. I've seen mock drafts that have Matt Corral in the top 10. It's really a crazy year. I think it's going to make our lives a little bit more fun come that time of year. I'm excited, looking forward to that. And obviously there's still a good chunk of college football left that needs to be played. So things can change. But right now, from the things that I've read and kind of started to do like general research on, it sounds like this is a very, very heavy defensive class with a lot of depth at cornerback and at the edge position, which I think you can make the argument both could be needs for the Vikings in the 2022 draft.
Everson Griffin will not play forever. He just won't. he can only come back and save this defense so many times. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of seems like, and this is where this is the transition. Oh wait, we should probably do game balls. As always, I don't know who we had. You had defense, so
Yep.
Who are you giving your defensive ball to?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think I'm going to give it to Bashad Breeland
Hell
just
yeah.
because he made that interception. We can talk about his Johnson one more time.
Hell yeah!
But yeah, it's. I mean, after getting called out, he's been playing good football. And it's not just the interception. I think he's had a couple pass breakups as well. He's been stickier in coverage. And let me remind you too, Bashad Breeland was injured to start the season off. He was playing hurt through the first 2 or 3 games. Vikings fans, Pioneer Press reporter, they were kind of getting under his skin a little bit. He's bounced back in a huge way, not only in pass coverage. He's been entertaining to watch in the run support game as well. So I'm going to give it to Bashad Breeland. I don't necessarily know if he's the most deserving. I know the Vikings forced a couple fumbles on top of the interception, but I did say that I felt like this was a game where the Vikings had to get a couple turnovers. They did exactly that. The opposite happened. I said the Vikings need to find a way to get a turnover and score a defensive touchdown. Excuse me, I just lost my train of thought there. The Panthers actually did that to the Vikings with a blocked punt, which was very frustrating. That got them back into the game, and that's why I give special teams. Maybe if I do this every week, I give the special teams grade an F because the special teams unit is atrocious. Please prove me wrong. Otherwise, every single week, if you missed one field goal, one extra point, anything bad, special teams, your grade for the week will be an F moving forward. But yeah, I'm gonna give it to Bashad Breeland and his Johnson. I'll say it one more time just because I know that's
so
the
good. It's
we
so
should just
good,
name
man.
we should name the box Bashad Breeland's Johnson podcast because that's kind of the direction we're going in. I don't know if that's necessarily the most family friendly title, so we'll just
we're gonna have to get Putty Volgo on that one. We're gonna have to start slapping an M for mature rating. Hey Jack, you want to guess who the offensive game ball's going to this week? You just want to take a shot?
It's harder than you're alluding to, I think, because if you look at the stat sheet, all 3 wide receivers had monster days. And I think that falls back on the shoulders of Kirk Cousins. I think you give the ball to Kirk Cousins because he was spreading the ball around. His receivers had a couple dropped balls as well. Adam Thielen had yet another spectacular catch. Did you know that he was on a $500 scholarship at the University of Mankato or whatever they call it now, Minnesota State Mankato?
He didn't even go to the regular combine. Rich Eisen gets to go to the combine, Jack.
I don't know. Yeah, you're a McAfee listener, so I don't know if you saw his interview, but I'm getting sidetracked. It's the bye week show, so bear with us. But Adam Thielen was being interviewed, and Pat McAfee was like, "Oh, well, you're an athlete, blah blah blah." And he was talking, and Adam Thielen stopped him. He's like, "Did you just call me an athlete?" And I thought that was hilarious. He's like, "No one calls me an athlete. I'm a hardworking," and he brought up all the stuff that the reporters call him on there, not an athlete. But he's like, they're like, what do you run for your 40? He's like, I ran a 4.45. It's like, Adam Thielen's fast. Yep. He is an athlete, and people don't give him credit for that. But yeah, I think you have to give it to Kirk Cousins as much as I would want to give it to KJ Osborne and his little, I'll say Minneapolis Miracle replica. That was kind of I kind of just threw that up out of my mouth. But I want to give it to KJ Osborne, but you have to go to Kirk Cousins. He made a great throw on that ball, and he made several great throws throughout the day. I think he finished with like 373 yards, if I'm not mistaken, and 3 touchdowns. So because he spread the ball around, there's other guys being fed. I think you have to give it to Kirk Cousins.
I strongly disagree. And I know Tom Day disagrees because the Tom Day offensive lineman of the week is Christian De La Salle because he showed up and showed out. And I'm just saying, look, I'll not hate on Cousins for a while, but there it is. That Tom Day in the chat saying offensive game ball should go to the O-line and Christian De La Salle because Cousins can't do anything. If Hill was out there, he would have been pancaked 6 times, and Cousins would have died because the Panthers have a good pass rush. They were top 5 in every defensive category.
Can I just say, Tom Day, offensive line appreciation post, offensive line game ball, minus Oli Udo for this one. I know Oli Udo is showing flashes. It was kind of a bummer because they kept talking about how his family was there. And he's like a local kid. And it's like, oh, there's a penalty. Like you wait and you're like, I wonder who it's on. It's like number 74. And it was like 4 or 5 times in a row. I was like, God, his family's there. You're really doing. And some of them I think were a little bit questionable. Some of them they were like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna get that called on you. But
It makes me so mad about Ali Udo too, because I coined the you can't spell O-line without Ali, and it's such a good I mean, slap it on a t-shirt and sell out immediately, and he's gonna be bad now because I got behind him. I need to stop talking good about Deosaw. Deosaw's bad. The game ball goes to KJ Osborne because I don't want to give it's like special teams. We can't talk good about the Vikings. We got to trash them every week, pick them to lose by 60, and they'll just keep winning, and that's the secret to the Super Bowl, I think. But Jeremiah Newell in the chat giving the thumbs up. Thanks for showing the support, Jeremiah. Jack, you want to talk head coaches?
yeah, let's do it. I think
All right.
I know you sent me a Snapchat last night. I think you have a little bit more research into this than myself.
I've tried to.
Which is a good thing because I can be kind of a student and kind of learn because I think we'll profess. Oh my God, I can't talk. We'll start by saying I think we both think that Mike Zimmer is going to be the head coach of this team for the rest of this season.
Yes.
Granted, unless like something dramatic happens where they do lose the next 4, then they go into San Fran and lose that game. I think there's an instance there where it's like, okay, but at the same time, the Vikings and this organization never gives me the feel that they're going to be like, oh, we're 3-8, 3-9, season's over. Let's see what we have in Kellen Mond. Let's give some of these draft picks a chance and see what they have because we have all these guys on 1-year deals. The Vikings never play that way. They're going to continue to try and fight their way back into the playoffs. You got to hope they somehow find a win in the next couple games because they're, like I said, I don't think the Vikings are going to be favored in any of the next 4. But I think you and I just wanted to start by saying that I think we both agree this is Mike Zimmer's team for 2021. This is more so if the Vikings don't make the playoffs, it's going to be, I'm sure we'll be having the conversation again then.
Yeah, and talking about the Cousins stuff, just briefly, I was alluding to it earlier, but I wanted to squeeze the game balls in there really quickly. I do think Cousins is the quarterback next season, almost no matter what. We could draft a guy, number 1 overall somehow, and he's still going to be the quarterback just because I think I don't know. Okay, well, the number 1 overall thing's probably too extreme, but if we draft a guy, we still have Kellen Mond, so I doubt we even will. And I also think that the new head coach will come in and maybe they like Cousins. Maybe there's some guys like Kyle Shanahan loves Kirk Cousins. He thinks he's, the best thing since sliced bread. So maybe it's a guy that comes in, he likes Cousins and he wants to give him kind of like a, hey, I'm going to give you 1 year. We're going to pay you all that money. No one's expecting us to be good. New head coach, it's okay. Maybe it's a down season. Let's see what you can do in my offense. And then we go on from there. And if he's bad, then maybe he gets yanked halfway through the season or something. But
are you alluding that all of your head coaches are offensive-minded individuals?
No,
because
I was not going to talk about one defensive coordinator. I don't want. I'm sure Vic Fangio might get fired at some point. I don't want Vic Fangio as my head coach. I'm tired of run the ball, throw the ball, punt. I'm tired of it. I'm tired. So I'm ready to talk about offense.
Yeah, let's hear it. I'm excited to see. I think I know all the names on your list, but I think you have the majority. My research task this week was college quarterbacks, and we already went over that. Kirk Cousins is the quarterback. I don't, like you just said, I think they drafted. I mean, Kellen Mond was the highest drafted quarterback this team has had since they traded back in the first round to get Teddy Bridgewater, which was probably 2014, if I'm remembering correctly. And I think there's some sort of faith that it doesn't necessarily show this year because he's not dressing for games. There's a plan in place. There's a reason behind that. Rick Spielman kind of talked about that in his press conference this week. But it's fun as a Vikings fan knowing that there is a quarterback kind of waiting in the shadows behind Kirk Cousins because this team hasn't had that. I don't know. When would you say Teddy was the last time they had that, and he was kind of given the starting job. So I'm excited to see even if it is a Kirk Cousins team in 2022, if Kellen Mond can earn and fight his way into that backup role in 2022.
Absolutely. And that'll definitely be a big storyline, but I'm excited to see what Kirk Cousins could do in one of these guys' offense. Let's start off. Let's do the obvious one. All right. Let's talk about him. Eric Bieniemy. He's the head coach. Oh, he's the head coach. He's the offensive coordinator, Kansas City Chief. Let's start with the pros. All right. He's been the OC for Kansas City the last 3 years, 2 years. This is his third year as the OC. He has not called plays at all during that stretch. That's a little bit of a con, but you're still the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, who have appeared in 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls, and they won one, and then they, got blown out in one. But, to each their own. Another pro that I've got from, he has been in the NFL. He got drafted in the 2nd round, so he played a little bit, bounced around, played for a few different teams. He's been coaching in the NFL, including being Adrian Peterson's and Jamal Charles' running backs coach for 15 years. 15 years of NFL coaching experience. This is a guy that's been there day in, day out. He sees what it takes to build championship rosters. He sees what bad teams do. He sees what good teams have done. This is kind of a 2A, if you will. He's been with he started coaching at Colorado, and then he came to the Vikings, went to the Chiefs. Those are his teams. So he's really, he's kind of stuck around the same 2 organizations. We'll get into that more with the next guy. But, he kind of does have that sticking around. I think he's well liked by ownership and GMs, blah, blah, blah. And the number 3 pro, and this is a pro for every single one of them. He's offensive. He's going to be an offensive-minded. Okay, I understand it's 2021, in this case 2022. We got to throw the ball, folks. We're paying Kirk Cousins $45 million next season. Justin Jefferson, first-round pick. Adam Thielen making all that money. Now we got KJ Osborne of Smith's back. We got too many weapons to be relying on just Dalvin Cook to be this offense with the occasional shot play to one of the really good wide receivers. So I think it's crucial that we get an offensive mind in here. So, Jack, Eric Bieniemy, what do you like about him before we get into cons? I know he's a name that's floated around everywhere all the time.
Well, I like the fact that he has ties to Minnesota. I think that makes the case a little bit stronger for him. Obviously, the Wilfs know who he is. They've hired him at some point. I think the Wilfs took over in the early 2000s or late 90s for Red McComb. And so they obviously were involved with that hiring. Obviously, coaches are involved in that process as well. But you just said it. Adrian Peterson's running backs coach, when Adrian Peterson was early on in his career, I think was it 2 years, if I'm mistaken, 2 or 3 years, something like that. Yeah. And Adrian Peterson throughout those first 2 or 3 years was spectacular. I think Adrian Peterson is a freak of nature. I'm not going to stand up here and say, hey, Eric Bieniemy made Adrian Peterson what he was, but he's been around. And Jamal Charles, by the way, was looked at in a similar manner. He was like, if you were playing fantasy football back then, you knew who Jamal Charles was. He was a PPR monster back then. He was a stud running back as well. I like that he's offensive. I like that he's been around a gunslinger and Patrick Mahomes. He's been learning under Andy Reid, who you and I both have a lot of respect for. So I like all of those things. I think one of my negatives, and you can get into yours as well, I'm just going to say one name as a negative. Matt Nagy.
Yes.
That's my negative is Matt Nagy. You see what he's doing for Chicago. He was in Kansas City as well prior, and he hasn't been able to find that offensive success that they had in Kansas City. So it kind of worries me. I don't know. I'd imagine he's fully exposed, obviously, to what Andy Reid's doing in the play calling, but to what extent is he in the ears? Like, does he know what is going through Andy Reid's head? That does worry me slightly. But I wouldn't be opposed to it. Like I said, I think my favorite part is he has ties to wearing purple. So he's definitely a strong candidate, especially if we start to see this team go downhill and miss the playoffs in 2021.
Absolutely. And Tom Day in the chat saying Eric Bieniemy was a stud running back in his time. Yeah, I mean, he was before my time. And he's obviously, he's not one of the all-timers that, everyone knows about growing up, like Barry Sanders or what have you. But getting into the cons about Bieniemy, and we talk about oblong footballs on this show. We don't get into politics. We don't get into legal stuff. He's had some legal troubles. Now, granted, they were 20 years ago whenever he got into a little bit of a skew of legal troubles. And for some reason, people keep saying that's why he's not getting jobs, because you would think the OC for the Chiefs after they won the Super Bowl would probably be a no-brainer. Someone's going to bring him in to be the head coach, and he still hasn't gotten a job. The one that bugs me the most about it, it's all kind of minor stuff. It's, blah, blah, blah. He got a DUI. It's a lapse of judgment. But again, this was in the early 2000s when he was coaching for like Colorado. This was not Eric Bieniemy of even 5 years ago. So I think he's kind of cleaned that up. So I threw it on there just because every time he's talked about in a head coaching light, it gets brought up as like, is that why he didn't get the job? And it's like, I mean, come on, Jaron Kearse got a DUI and he had a gun in the car and he's playing for the Cowboys now. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, people make mistakes. It kind of is what it is. Con number 2 is my biggest one, though, and it goes along with Matt Nagy. Pat Mahomes has been his quarterback all 3 years that he's been in Kansas City. Kind of easy to have a good-looking offense when you've got Pat Mahomes. Now, granted, Pat Mahomes benefits from his system, as any great quarterback does, but I just think it's a lot easier to call a really good offense whenever you have that guy playing quarterback, especially the way he played his his second year in the league and his third year in the league. This year they're kind of having a down year, so maybe this Bieniemy stuff maybe his stock is going down a little bit. And then the obvious con, doesn't call plays. He just doesn't call plays, and I think if you're bringing in an offensive-minded head coach, you're probably going to want him to call the plays. His scheme, his mind on the game, and like you said, Matt Nagy. So I think you kind of covered the Matt Nagy stuff perfectly. It's scary, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's kind of all I'm going to say with Bieniemy. Moving on to another name that is really skyrocketing the last couple of years. Brian Daboll, offensive coordinator for the Bills. 2 offensive coordinators from the AFC. He's been the OC for the Bills for 2 years. You could argue in those 2 years, he is responsible for the Josh Allen turnaround, making him go from a guy whose career highlight was going to be jumping over Anthony Barr against Minnesota into a guy whose career highlight might one day be winning a Super Bowl or an MVP. And then also he's got 21 years of experience in the NFL as a coach. Daboll, I don't know a ton about. I did some research into him. The more research I did into him, the less I liked him, to be honest with you. Jack, I'm sure you're familiar with the Bills. Obviously, though, they look really good this year. What do you think of Daboll / the Bills offense?
Yeah, I think the biggest positive is something that we haven't seen in the NFL. And I don't know how much you can credit this, if this is a quarterback's coach thing, if it's just a Josh Allen and his work ethic type of thing. You rarely see, and I don't know if there's not any other names that pop into my head when thinking of Josh Allen, where the year prior to last season, so was that his rookie season, 2018 was his rookie or whatever. Year. So he was inefficient. He was mildly inaccurate. And like you said, the Anthony Barr stuff is like, cool. There's a 6'6" beast that can run as a quarterback. Can he throw it? We've known that the guy has a rocket launcher for an arm, but he was inaccurate. The last couple seasons, you get him a wide receiver 1 and Stephon Diggs, and he turns that around somehow. He becomes a more efficient and more accurate quarterback, still utilizing his legs. It's like, whoa, he already had that rocket launcher of an arm. I saw, I don't remember who it was talking about him, but he was saying essentially he's seen 2 quarterbacks coming out of college that throw the ball as effortless as what Josh Allen does. And it's Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, who, in my opinion, are both going to be in the MVP conversations towards the end of this season. So what is he going to be able to do if he comes into an offense where he has Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Irv Smith Jr., Dalvin Cook? Let me remind you, the Buffalo Bills in their run game, Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, they're not good. They're not anywhere near the level that Dalvin Cook is on. They have Stephon Diggs, but after that, it's Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders and Dawson Knox. What is a guy going to do if you give him the keys to that offense where it's just like star after star at the playmaking positions are on that offense? And oh, by the way, you already have an accurate quarterback. I think you're going to have to kind of take the offense back a notch, because Kirk Cousins, he's not what Josh Allen is. You're not going to see Kirk Cousins hurdling over linebackers at any point.
But you know who you might see do that? Kellen Mond, which is kind of why I like him.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be opposed to that. I don't know a ton about him outside of just knowing kind of the structure of the Bills' offense. Does he does call the plays for them there, I'm assuming?
Yes, he does. Because McDermott is a defensive
that's
guy.
What I figured. So that would make sense. Obviously, I probably shouldn't even ask.
No. It's
yeah, the Josh Allen turnaround, I think, makes it worth investigating at the very least. I don't know if that's necessarily the direction the team would go. But at the same time, I think the Wilfs are, to an extent, sick of the style of playing, or the play style that the Minnesota Vikings have had as well. I don't think it's just a fan base thing. I think they want to be entertained. And the style of play that we've seen over the last couple of years, yes, games can be entertaining. They have the firepower to put up massive numbers against a great defense like Carolina, but it's just so inconsistent. Find some consistency to that. Maybe hand the keys over to Andre Patterson as defensive coordinator, let him call plays, and just see where it goes. At the very least, they struggle out of the gates. Then you fire them, and you see it's a revolving door at that point. That's kind of what we were used to prior to the Mike Zimmer era, anyways, where it was like Brad Childress, Mike Tice, Leslie Frazier. We've had consistency over the last since 2014 when Zimmer was hired, but it's starting to show that this team, it's not consistent. Zimmer's been consistent. He's been consistent at getting his team to the playoffs every other season, and then losing in the biggest moment. So it's been frustrating. I think the team is sick of that. And I think the ownership wants to see something where we're going to start seeing a more kind of a sexy is the word I want to use, like a sexy offensive scheme.
Well,
and I think you could maybe see that with him.
And I think and I don't think the Wilfs are going to factor this into a head coaching decision, which, don't forget, the GM kind of makes that call too. Like, the GM has heavy hand in picking his head coach that, he's going to maximize the potential out of the players he selected. I think the Wilfs, if Zimmer's gone, they're probably going to get rid of Spielman. Oh, they're going to tell Spielman, we want a guy that's going to put butts in the seats and throw the ball some. Because also, from a business standpoint, Justin Jefferson is going to sell a lot more jerseys than Eric Kendricks is. And I love Eric Kendricks. Favorite player on the Vikings. He's elite. He's great. I would say he's the best middle linebacker in football. He's not going to sell as many jerseys as an MVP level quarterback, a top 5 wide receiver. Justin Jefferson's hanging out with LeBron James during the Lakers game last night. Like, it's different. It's just different being an offensive superstar in the league. So I think that'll factor into it. Let me tell you why, though we look at Daboll, I don't know necessarily that I like Daboll. Those 21 years of experience, I legitimately think, I didn't count them one by one. I think he's been on 18 different rosters, and I think he's been an offensive coordinator on like 5 of them. And I think his best offense before Buffalo was like 26th. So he has not been very good. He was Eric Mangini's OC in Cleveland when they were the worst offense in the league, and it was not close, and he was calling plays in all of them. That's literally, it's had bad offenses, and it's taken him 18 years to find success now. He has been coaching for a long time, and he's just now kind of finding his footing. I don't know if maybe something clicked and he started changing things up. I'm not positive, but whenever you have a guy who's been an OC 6 times or 7 times, and he's always had bad offenses, and then suddenly, everything's really good, I think you kind of say, okay, maybe that's more Josh Allen. And that's con number 3, in my opinion, is, did he fix Josh Allen, or did Josh Allen fix himself and, maybe work with some throwing coaches and blah, blah, blah. And this one, this is the hot topic right now. This is the, let me cough really quick. This is the, I don't know, he's like the hot new superstar, new kid on the block, Kellen Moore. He's calling Dallas's plays right now. A lot of people in Dallas just fire Mike McCarthy. He's not a good head coach. He doesn't do anything besides mismanage time. Sounds like Mike Zimmer almost. But Kellen Moore, have you seen Dallas's offense? That's literally what I wrote down for the pro number 1. They run the ball extremely well. They throw the ball extremely well. I think it's so crucial whenever you're looking at these young-minded offensive head coaches. A lot of them are, they run the air raid. They're going 5 wide every play and trying to spread defenses and doing all this stuff that you see in college. Kellen Moore's not afraid to line up and just, he will pound the beef. He's not anti-running the ball. He gets up, he runs the ball. Granted, Dallas has a really good O-line, but he does kind of do what the game calls for. If they can't find success in the air, he'll go to Zeke. If Zeke's not working, he'll either go to Tony Pollard or he'll start airing the ball out. So another thing I like about him, he has NFL quarterback experience, so that might help him in developing a young quarterback. we go down that path. But with Cousins, even I think Kellen Moore being able to talk with Cousins, about what he likes. I think they're the same age basically. They're like neck and neck with age. So Kellen Moore being his coach, kind of almost I would assume have a really tight bond with Cousins because they can be like, hey, we both played, like I played for the Rams and you played for the football team and they both sucked. Isn't it nice to not suck anymore? Like, I don't know. I just feel like that's a match made in heaven. Jack, tell me what you like about Dallas's offense. I know you're a fantasy guy, so I'm sure you know a couple of things about Dallas's offense because honestly, anybody on that offense is money in terms of fantasy. But what do you like about that offense?
Yeah, I think it could translate very well to what the Vikings have on the table. If you look at what Dallas does, they still have Zeke, who's starting to play at a high level again, and they have Tony Pollard. They have two running backs this was the last time I saw a stat on this was probably 2-3 weeks ago, but they were both extremely efficient. And I want to say Tony Pollard was actually averaging more yards per carry than Zeke was. And on top of it, you look at the kind of the weapons they have on that team. It's very similar. And I'm not ready. I shouldn't say similar with KJ Osborne quite yet, but Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb. I almost spaced out on his name there. And they're also bringing, is it Schultz, their tight end, who they're bringing
Yes.
along? And it's like, look at that offense. The Vikings have a young tight end that's coming off of IR next year that is bound to have a breakout season if he stays healthy next year. You have an already top 5. I think Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb were both the top 2 wide receivers out of that draft class. And then you have 2 crafty veterans in Adam Thielen and Amari Cooper that are great route running wide receivers. So if he's finding success there, it'd be interesting to see what he does as a head coach. It's the direction I think a lot of the NFL fan bases want to go in. They want to hire whatever's the shiniest toy in the room, whatever the newest and youngest coach is. They want that option because we've seen success with guys like Sean McVay. You're starting to see the camaraderie that these younger coaches can build because they're the same age as most of these guys. Granted, I shouldn't say the same age, but they're upper 30s when all these guys are late 20s, early 30s. So like they understand what they're going through. They're more like they're fresh. I know, is it Joe Brady, another one that you wanted to talk about at one point
So
with
I didn't
Carolina?
throw Joe Brady on there because their offense looked like dog duty against us.
And I
was like, nah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another interesting name that I think will continue to get brought up. But at the same time, it's like you look at him and that LSU offense that he was the passing game coordinator for, if I'm remembering correctly.
He was the OC.
Yeah, was he the
he was
the
the
OC and the passing game.
Yeah.
I think it was both of them. But yeah, so he had Joe Burrow throwing it to Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Terrence Marshall, who got lit up by Xavier Woods on Sunday, but and then they had Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Thaddeus Moss. It was probably the most prolific college offense that we have ever seen. And they had, that's a wide receiver. That's 2 wide receivers that were taken the first round, 1 in the second round, a first round running back, and the number 1 overall pick and Heisman winning quarterback for your team. So that was a special team. It'll be interesting. I think he had some unique play calls against the Vikings defense. And when it mattered the most, his offense turned it on. So that's another name worth monitoring. But I think that covers the basis. And at the same time, I think more names will start to kind of get thrown into the pot when we start talking about this 10 weeks from now.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good bye week conversation to have, especially when a Vikings team that was supposed to be, I think it's fair to say the Vikings should be above 500 right now. I think that was the expectations going into this season, and they're not quite there. If they can turn things around, that'd be great. I think it'd be fun to watch this team turn things around with the level that Kirk Cousins is playing at. But right now, I don't have the confidence that that's going to happen. And if that doesn't happen, I think there is going to be a change at the head coaching position.
Absolutely. And I think anything short of this team doing a complete 180 coming out of the gates, they're going to have to win like 2 or 3 out of the next 4 to really prove themselves and to have a chance to, be one of those teams that's there at the end. And we'll see what happens. To finish up on Kellen Moore, the bad part about him, I on my life, I think he was still playing quarterback in the league 3 years ago. Like he has not coached for very long. I think 3 years ago he was on a roster, and then it was QB coach, OC and now second year of OC, so like 3 years of coaching experience. And also similar to, Bieniemy getting Pat Mahomes, that O-line in Dallas is really good, and their defense. It's easy to have a good offense whenever your defense keeps getting turnovers. And right now, their defense is turnover crazy. Trayvon Diggs is on fire. He's a name that, I wish we could talk about more. Just if Stefan was still here, we probably could. But there's no way to get there. So
we'll talk about him next week. Plenty, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. There you go. What a plug. But to wrap it up, like you said, he's the shiny toy right now. So I don't know if Minnesota with Kirk Cousins is the best job for him to take whenever he might be able to go to the Jacksonville's job might be open. He might be able to go take that over.
So question for you then. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
I think the Vikings head coaching position, if Zimmer is let go, will be one of the top jobs on the market, regardless of if it's a shiny new toy or a 25-year veteran in the league, because they have Kirk Cousins. They have a quarterback they're developing. They have everything you could possibly dream of at the skilled position. I think there's going to be some work needed on the defensive side of the ball, but they have I shouldn't say brand new, but the US Bank Stadium still feels like a brand new stadium. They have a world-class training facility in Eagan, Minnesota. Like, this is a very appealing job, in my opinion. I think Minnesota kind of gets looked at. It's like, oh, it's Minnesota. It's always cold there. It's like, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a great spot to be. The fan base is passionate. They want this team to be successful. You see that when they were in the playoffs in 2017 with Case Keenum. I mean, he's trying to shovel his driveway, and his neighbors won't even let him do that because they're like, don't hurt yourself. We want, and it's like, that's the type of passion and loyalty you're going to see in Minnesota. So I just think personally, and this could be a little bit of bias in me because I've grown up in Minnesota. I've followed this team for 26 years of my life, but it's here. We already have a veteran quarterback that's established in the league. Yeah, he might not be the shiniest toy, but Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars are 1-5, and Trevor Lawrence has had his ups and downs throughout the season. Yes, he was looked at as the next Andrew Luck, I shouldn't say the next Andrew Luck or Peyton Manning, but he was coming out of college. He was looked at as that high of a recruited player. So I don't know. I think, and it's in Florida, obviously, which sounds more appealing than Minnesota.
No sales tax down there.
I do think that there's a lot of appeal to this job if Zimmer loses his job, because especially if it's an offensive-minded coach, you'd have to think he'd be drooling to get in here and get his hands on some of these skilled guys.
I wonder, though, and this is that we don't have time in this show to go into these full-fledged debate topics, so if they ever add an 18th game and a second bye week, we'll make sure to talk about it bye week 2. But I don't know, man. I think Cousins could be a detractor. I know he's good, but I do wonder how many people would be like, yeah, but I don't want to spend all my money on the offensive line. And you can kind of get away with having a worse O-line if you have a quarterback that's a little bit more athletic. Look at what the Bengals did. They went and they signed Riley Leaf, to a moderate contract. They took a lot of flack for not taking Penei Sewell, but they ended up taking a guy in the second or third round, and they've kind of put a ragtag group of offensive linemen together to protect Joe Burrow, and they've done an all right job of it. It's not an elite O-line, but I think the thought process was, we don't need an elite O-line. We've got Joe Burrow. And he'll be able to make some things happen. But I do agree. This offense feels kind of move in ready, if you will. But just some names to keep an eye on. Always fun to talk about bullcrap during the bye week. And of course, the bye week show is the longest show of the season so far, because that's kind of tradition on this channel now at this point. I think the first show we ever did together was a bye week show, and I think it went for over 2 hours. And an hour and a half of that was just talking about, it was literally just us chuckling, saying did you know Adam Thielen was an undrafted, first guy in, last guy out, didn't go to the combine. So that's really all I got. I will say my favorite out of those 3 names is probably Bieniemy, just because I'd like to see us try and, come in here and lie to me and tell me Kellen Mond has Mahomes potential. And if they suck, they suck, like Jack said. It's an evolving dough. We'll start spinning it until we find somebody, and then we'll all hop on the train together. But that's all I've got this week. I'll keep my closing thoughts short and brief here. For the essence of time. Follow me on Twitter at jhawthorne16. Follow Jack on Twitter at Jack_H_day. Really elite stuff coming out from Jack just all the time. Articles, especially, and this is no knock. I promise this is not a knock. Draft time is when it excels the most. So like if you're into the draft stuff, especially, like, give him a follow. I don't know why I've got draft on the mind, talking about like next season basically. But and then make sure that you're following the show on Twitter. It's scrolling across the bottom right now, at LTB Vikings, for really good content. And that's really all I got, man. Fun show as always. So Jack, get me hyped up for a weekend of Vikingless football.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it short and sweet this week as well. I think that the Timberwolves tip off here in less than an hour now, so I'm going to take in some basketball, which is weird to say because I haven't been excited for the Timberwolves in many years. They have Anthony Edwards, Cat, everyone's healthy. Excited to watch at the Wild. They're playing well right now, and they play Saturday, Sunday this weekend. I'll still be watching more football probably than I'll be watching the Minnesota Wild. But it's been entertaining to say the least. They had a very fun game. I don't know if you saw the highlight reel of.
I didn't see.
Foligno.
I saw
there was the sucker punch out. Did you see that?
No,
that was
I didn't see anything about. I saw it was like a 7-6 game or something.
Yeah,
crazy
6-5.
Like
they won in overtime. So when we're done with the show, and if you're watching the show and you haven't seen this, go on Twitter and just type in Foligno fight or Marcus Foligno fight, and he literally does an MMA type move. He doesn't fully connect. If you would have connected, it would have been he would have been KO'd for sure. But he like jumped off of the ice and like did a Superman punch and tried. They was in a fight, like they were already squared up, and he did that and he like grazed the side of his helmet. But I was like, oh my god, if he would have connected with his face, that guy would have been eating ice pretty darn quickly. So there's my little nugget of the night. Go watch that if you enjoy watching hockey and enjoy hockey fights. Make sure you check that out. But also make sure you tune in next week. I think we'll be back on track a little bit more per se. I guess we're never fully on track on this show, but we'll be kind of grinding along the track a little bit, trying to get our show figured out a little bit, back on into the swing of things, within a very, very difficult schedule upcoming that we've alluded to probably 5-6 times throughout the show already.
Yeah, we're gonna have to start doing the show liquored up next month. Like it's gonna get rough. I think
it could get to that point where we're gonna have to have a couple beers after work and get on here. But until then, we'll wait until then, because I think the Vikings maybe, like I said, come back next week to find this out. See what our thoughts are on this Dallas game. Spooky Halloween night game for the Vikings at US Bank Stadium. Take on the Dallas Cowboys. We will be all over it next Wednesday. Make sure you tune in. Most importantly, Skol as always.